Welcome back, Inebri-art. This is your host, as always, Andy, and I'm joined today by director Chad Ferrin, who, we get a lot of PR stuff through our email, and every once in a while, one kind of just jumps out at you, and when you get one for a well called Pig Killer, you're like, all right, hang on, let me look a little deeper into this. Um,
Don't
so,
look too deep.
well, I did a Google search on. Oh, we'll get to that. But you've directed several horror movies. And I was just telling you before we start, we just finished our first horror convention. Um, I love horror movies. I love bad horror movies. Um, so where does I suppose where's your love of horror come from? Like, has it always
Uh,
been there? Did it develop later on, or?
Growing up as a kid on a little Midwestern farm with a 13-inch black and white Quasar television, hooked on Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock Presents and One Step Beyond, The Outer Limits. All that stuff kind of just shaped where it all started at birth, really. The TV was my babysitter, and we had this long affair going, and that kind of was the birth of it all.
It's so funny. Like I was very much the same way, but the thing that like piqued my interest into the macabre was, do you remember? There used to be I can't remember the actor's name. He was in City Slickers, but he did
Jack Palance?
Ripley. I'm sorry.
Jack Palance?
Yes, he did Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Oh, sure, sure.
And it was the creepiest show. Like he could be doing like the most mundane, like look at this dog who has two tails, but just the way he does it, it's so creepy.
Right.
And like I just fell in love with like all everything weird and creepy and eerie. That was where it all began for me.
Yeah, no, because I think you're around creepy, so a nice escape is something creepier. Is my way of looking at it. I've growing up, you seeing animals killed and people bullied. All these things that you just kind of roll off your back. You kind of want to escape into something that's even more demented, I guess, for me.
I yeah, I can relate to that. And you made me think of I'm sure you heard of or it'll probably seen the Netflix movie Don't Look Up.
Sure.
And everyone's like, "Oh, it's so great." I'm like, "I didn't like it.
Right.
It was too real. Like I didn't enjoy it. It took me like 3 sittings to get through it cuz I'm like, this isn't escapism. It's like that's how shit is." And I
Right. Right.
didn't like it. So, it's interesting cuz you imply that you're looking for things that aren't as creepy as real life, but then you base Pig Killer on a real life serial killer.
Well, I take the gigs as they come, and one of those things where Kate Patel came to me with the story, and I had never heard of the guy. I had heard things about killers feeding victims to pigs and things, but I never specifically heard about Willie. And she kind of pitched this idea of him, and I'm like, well, we both grew up on farms. We both had fucked up parents. We both had a love for animals in a sense. So there were things that I could relate to with the guy. And I was like, if you can raise, 150 to $200,000, count me in. And she said, yeah, that's no problem. So I said, okay, give me $3,000. I'll go write the script. She gave me $3,000. I went home, wrote the script, and 2 weeks later, sent it to her, and she dug it. And I was like, a month after that, we were shooting it.
So how close? So it's based off of Robert Willie Picton,
Yeah,
who's one of Canada's most infamous serial killers, according to Wikipedia.
right.
And I had never heard of him, and it sounded like I think he was arrested in like the '90s, early '90s, or something like that.
Yeah, late '90s, early 2000s. I think he was on trial in 2002, something around that.
Yeah, so it's fairly. I feel like that obviously didn't make like world news because I'd never heard of it.
I think
Um,
Canada kept it kind of buried because they didn't want it getting out, and they're not sensationalizing it like the U.S. would or anything like that. So
oh
they kind
yeah,
of kept it quiet, even to the point when we were playing film festivals. A lot of Canadian film festivals said, we're funded partially by the government, and there's no way we can play this because they might pull the funding.
no
Anything that
kidding.
mentions or is close to hitting home with Canada. So it was like,
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah.
So how close is it to the like? Obviously, you took your inspiration, but like, how close Like, where does it veer from true crime to horror? I suppose
I'd
that's
say, 90% of the elements in there are true. Little things like the pig mask is, my nod to Motel Hell, or, Deranged. There's some elements of, films that I just love that I sprinkled throughout there. But, a lot of the stuff, the pistol with the dildo silencer, the injecting victims with windshield washer fluid and antifreeze. I mean, the parties, all that stuff's true stuff. The messed up parents. I mean, the brother. I mean, Pat, the guy with the tracheotomy, he's a true character who ended up, turning on Willie and giving state evidence and, all this kind of stuff. So, and the last final scene after the credits is word for word the police informant recording.
oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, why? So I don't get true crime. Like, and I think it's that like I don't like to think about real creepy shit. I like weird
Sure,
creepy
sure.
shit. But what people love serial killers. They love to know about them, and like what is it? What compels people to kind of
I think that that it really happened, and these people could be right next door to you. They could be your best friend. They could be in and they kind of keep it hidden, and they're doing this stuff behind the curtain. And people are fascinated by that, and it's scary, but it's close to home for a lot of people because everyone's got a serial killer from their hometown, or that they knew someone who knew someone who knew someone who was associated with them. Kate, her aunt had gone to one of the parties, so there was a thing that kind of went full circle for her because she grew up in Vancouver and she had kind of an obsession with this guy because it was in the news around there at the time, and she kind of just had this dying urge to tell his story. And when she gave it to me, I think it might have been a different thing, of a more serious tone and a thing, but for me, I just kind of take things as they come, and
Mhm.
I let it out, and what comes. I don't try to be as serious as someone might have taken his story, because to me there's elements of humor in everyone who's violent or whatever. Hitler might have had a great sense of humor, I don't know, but there are elements that I find interesting that try to bring a humanity to someone so vile, and at the same time, keep it entertaining, because who wants to watch 2 hours of a guy, sniveling down, chopping up bodies? And, I try to put a little thing of the reality of, because everyone has something, whether it's they're a good cook or they're charming or whatever it might be, and a dark side. And his happened to be, chopping up prostitutes and feeding to his pigs. And I try to ride a light element of that to keep it so it's not as depressing, gloom and doom, through the whole watch.
Yeah, I mean, I can even think of, I remember when I was a kid, the first time watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like I remember there's like a scene where they're trying to like put the hammer in the grandfather's hand so he
Right,
can
right,
take the killing blow, and it just keeps like falling out. And
right.
me and my friends were dying laughing. And you're like, this isn't supposed to be funny, but it's hysterical. So I mean, there's that kind of, yeah, I don't know, like almost somewhere between. You need that laughter to kind of like alleviate some of that creep and pressure, I think.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
Kind of release it before you blow up, kind of thing.
Um, were there parts of his story that you're like, that's too far. I'm not gonna put
No.
that in. No. I love horror people. They're like, no, no, whatever. It was all fucked up.
That's the funny thing is, a lot of people, a lot of the reviews recently, I just find such great offense. They're like, what about the victims? What about the victims? And I'm like, the victims are dead. I mean, I really, is there a time period that it's like, oh, if this were 50 years ago, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's like, it's too soon, or, it's like, shit happens, people die. I
I'm
just kind of, I look at it as nihilistically as possible. Some were good people, some were bad people. What happened. I'm just trying to paint a picture of a film that's entertaining with some bits of fact, and someone might find it offensive, but they might find something interesting within it to make them go look up the story and then donate to women's shelters or whatever they might do to help them feel better. But to me, it's making a film and art, and some people are going to dig it and some people are going to hate it. And I just kind of, roll with the punches. I don't let it get me down because I move on to, I'm shooting a film in December. For me, you
Yeah.
just keep making them and you hope the next one's better than the previous one. And that's kind of my
Yeah.
business
Too
model.
too soon. I'm like, it was like 25 years ago. Like
Right.
that. But yeah, I don't get that because then like I remember when 9/11 happened, like those movies came out like the next year, and I'm like, I don't want to relive that. That was too soon.
Right.
Yeah. Um, although my favorite too soon story, I had a buddy who was a bartender, and customer sits down, or two customers sit down, and one of them's like, I don't know what I want. He's like, what should I have? My buddy's like, how about a Pearl Harbor? And he's like, will it get me bomb like Pearl Harbor? And the guy's like, bro, too soon. And I'm like, that was World War II. But yeah. So you said you're working on a film in December?
Yeah, where I'm doing another H.P. Lovecraft film, Beyond the Wall of Sleep, with Eddie Furlong, Bai Ling, Ginger Lynn, Robert Miano, Susan Prever, Steve Railsback. It should be a lot of fun.
You did the deep ones, right? That
Yeah, I did the deep ones back in 2000, I guess. Then I just were its sequel, the old ones, is hitting festivals this year and then coming out in March, I believe.
he's one of those guys. Like I'm not a big reader. Have a little touch of dyslexia, so I don't find it that enjoyable. But people love his writings. I mean,
No, I can understand. As a kid, I was always kind of like it was a slog to get through his stuff.
yeah,
But as an adult, it's really I've grown to love it more than I'd even expected to. Even when I did the deep ones, it was kind of like going through all of his stuff and then refreshing my mind and picking stories that I liked and elements from them, and it was a treasure trove of inspiration and the stuff he came up with, in the 1920s is phenomenal. I mean, it's influenced pretty much everybody. So, and the fact that it's in public domain is the icing on the cake.
oh
So,
yeah, for sure.
anyone can do it or pull stuff from it. And there's fanatics out there who, eat up his stuff, but at the same time, they get so serious that you didn't say his name right, or you didn't do this. And it's like, all of this stuff is like, if you can find inspiration in anyone's writing and use it, I think it's just a great homage to them. And, no matter where, if they're up above or down below, they're smiling in some way because they're remembered all these years later.
Yeah, it's I don't know. There's something like so creepy about his stuff, and just that kind of the elder god kind of
Right, right.
it's when it's the serial killer like Pig Killer, you're like, all right, maybe I could get away, or maybe I could take him out, or the law will prevail. But when it's like Cthulhu, you're just like, no, we're pretty much all screwed.
It's over.
Yeah. So when you're filming a movie like Pig Killer, you get your actors, you get your special effects people, because those are really the keys to all good horror.
Sure.
But then, like, where do you start? Are you a storyboard kind of guy? I know, like, everyone's kind of doing like animatics now. Like, it seems like with technology advancing, people spend more time. I feel like they spend more time prepping. Maybe that's just my misunderstanding of the business.
No, I mean, on all of these, I kind of go by the same business model: fast, cheap, and to get as much as you can. And so my prep is usually about a month ahead of time, just scouting and finding locations and everything. And then once the locations and cast is locked, maybe make another pass through the script to kind of visualize the actual locations with what I had in the script to make sure that kind of is copacetic. And then my DP, Jeff Billings, who I've worked with on the past couple films, I send it to him. He kind of goes through it, and he's like, yeah, we can do this, and we can add this visual effects, and it's like, okay, that's great. Joe Castro, my special effects makeup guy, he goes through it and says, yeah, we can do this will be great, but cutting off a head and doing this, that'll cost this much. And I'm like, okay, forget the head. It comes down to how much money you've got and whatever. And then it's also, we did a 120 page script in 12 days, so it's at least 10 pages a day, sometimes more. And you kind of just, if the actors know their lines and they're on, par with what the vision is, you're great. Because then you get one or two takes, move on, another setup, move on, move on, move on, move on, move on. And, it's an exciting thing because you're not over planning it or overdoing it. You kind of know the routine and the time you have to get it. And if things aren't working, you just like, okay, scrap it. Let's do it this way instead. And you're flexible with the vision, so to speak. So if an actor comes up with some great improv or has a character that does it in a different way than you might have written, it's like, great, they're on board and they're feeling that energy and they feel even more invested because you're giving them the freedom to kind of roll with it. And it's been a fun, exciting way to kind of make films instead of, storyboarding every scene and setting it up. And then you get on the set and it's like, wow, this looks nothing like, these storyboards, and you just kind of, roll with it. And some films that works really well for some scenes, it kind of messes up and you just have to quickly rethink a way to make it work and then finally make it rework everything in the editing room, and then it really starts to shine or stink.
And I think that's kind of like a hallmark of horror movies, is that kind of, let's make it work. Would you, I mean, obviously everyone would like more money, but would you really want like an Avengers movie level budget to make something like Pig Killer?
No. To make a Western or a period piece, sure, but I don't think, in those terms. I kind of take it as it is. I don't aspire anymore to be, Akira Kurosawa or someone, or David Lynch or any of these people that have their niche and it's big and it's great and everyone kind of loves their stuff. It's like, if I can be Al Adamson or Ed Wood, I'm fine and happy with that. I like getting people that I've worked with before and have a good time with together, shoot a movie out in a week or two, and have fun doing it, and then hope an audience connects with it.
Ed
sometimes
Wood's,
they do, sometimes
yeah, Ed Wood's one of those great examples. I mean, like, as much as people knock him, like, to this day people still watch and love his movies, even though, like, when I started, I love bad horror movies, I love bad movies in general. The radioactive crickets that are climbing up the side of the Empire State Building. You're like, those are just regular crickets on a postcard of the Empire State Building, But there's something about like that creative solution to be like, well, we have $8 to make this shot work, and
right. No, the stuff I loved about him, look, he, when no one was giving Bela Lugosi a work, he gave him work on a nickel, and they shot these things in like 4 or 5 days on film. And, to me, that's impressive. And to call him, the worst filmmaker is laughable, because there's tons of worse filmmakers out right now as we speak. So, it's insane.
Yeah, I remember when I was first introduced to him, like, it was in high school and it was long before the internet, and it kind of gave you that, like, I have this cool thing. I've seen Plan 9 for Outer Space, and people are like, what's that? And you're like, oh, it's the worst movie ever made. And then you see something like Manos, The Hands of Fate, and you're like, all right, hang on. Plan 9's pretty good.
Which even Manos has some charms. I mean, that's the thing when people crap on these movies to the degree it's like, Killer Shrews is a masterpiece. When you look at certain things and the time they had to do, I'm always thinking about that. Or when I see a shot of a gag that works for them, I'm like, oh, that's how they did it. And it's ingenious to save the time and the money into, dressing dogs up in these costumes. And I mean, it's great, and there's a giant Gila monster. I mean, these movies are so much fun. But at the same time, when you figure out their limitations, it's like, that's pretty impressive. What they're able to do. And then you hear about, how much money they made on the drive-in circuit and all this stuff, and they're still being talked about today, or they're on television late at night. And you're like, that's something to aspire to for me more than, a Spielberg type career or something. It's to make things that someday, someone will see late at night on TV and be inspired the same way I was, so.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Manos is just hard to get through, man. It's so slow.
Yes.
Like, it's not that it's bad. It's so goddamn slow that I can't watch for more than 20 minutes.
I remember a while back there was a little thing on eBay where someone had found the actual negative of Manos, or like all the camera
Oh,
negatives,
wow.
and he bought them off eBay for like a nickel, and then he basically reassembled it all, and then was put up a Kickstarter to get money to basically do a top-notch Blu-ray of it. And it was like a pretty neat story. And when they show the pictures of the film cans and this drippy old, cellar, you're like, that's pretty amazing that something snuck its way in there and lived and now can be restored for, whoever, Quentin Tarantino, to play at the New Beverly or something.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what else is out there, you know.
Right, right.
Yeah, I feel like every once in a while you hear about like a old Doctor Who that's been long lost that they found in like Bangladesh on, something weird.
Sure.
Um, so my favorite place, actually, I don't subscribe to Shutter, so I couldn't tell you, but I love Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime has like the best bad movies out there. Um, do you spend a lot of time watching like other horror movies, or are you just kind of like busy working on what you're?
No,
I was going
I'm
to ask you
always
for recommendations, basically.
anything, from Pupi Avati. He's an Italian horror filmmaker. He did, Zader, House of Laughing Windows. I mean, his stuff is just really amazing. The mood and the sense of dread that is in these is phenomenal. I mean, I'm not a streaming guy. I get my movies from the library.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I'm big on physical media, and you just type in the library. Some library around the state will have it. You have it sent to your library. You walk over there, pick it up, go home and watch. Like a Japanese film that is obscure that you'd never heard of, but you're like, oh, let me check this out. Like the Zatoichi series. From like 1962 to 1990, it was like these series of like Lone Wolf and Cub type films, but before Lone Wolf and Cub with the blind
Yeah.
sword. And when I started getting into those, I was like, holy shit, here's something I had not seen. I'd heard about, but never seen it. And then picked it up at the library, watched the first episode, and it was like, cocaine. I'd have more and more and more. Then I buy the Criterion Blu-ray set of them all. It's pop them in, and I'm watching one after the other because it was so magical and so well done. And the lead actor is so charismatic and so good. You're like, okay, this is how, if you've never heard of an actor and you see them, like a Brad Pitt or someone, you just automatically know, okay, that guy's got something. He's going
Right.
somewhere. And the same thing with this guy. He was just phenomenal. And I was hooked on, seeing not only that, but any other films he had been in, because he's just got that something. And, it's a magical thing when you find stuff that may have a huge following and may be a huge thing, but it's new to you. And it kind of reinvents your awe of cinema. And so finding new stuff and everything is a great thing about the library. You go there's tons of stuff on the shelf, and here's a little Italian film by Fellini or someone that you may not have seen it. You go home and you're like, wow, this 8.5 is really something. And then you're kind of you're new to something that you kind of thought, well, I've seen it all. But it's really, there's so much out there, and I've thought, I grew up watching, 5 movies a day on a Betamax. I mean, you might, beg my parents to come home with some movies, and they bring, Saturn III, Taxi Driver, Quest for Fire, and you're like, your mind's blown, and then, you're kind of hooked from then on. And it's still an exciting thing at, 50 years old, to find some stuff that you'd not heard of before and pop it in and be blown away.
And it's every time you uncover like one of those unknown gems, it leads to more, because you're like,
Right.
I didn't know of this director or actor or genre, or like who influenced this, and then you're like, oh, that leads you down like so many different avenues into other movies. And
Sure.
yeah. Do you have a particular favorite director?
God. Tobe Hooper is somebody I'm always going back to. And, it's funny because he had such a great, diverse career of things that can be considered crap to things that are like, wow. But
Yeah.
even the crap has elements of greatness. I mean, Eaten Alive has some amazing things. I mean, Neville Brand is a fucking fantastic. And there are certain things when you watch that and then you watch Salem's Lot, it's like, wow. I mean, it's amazing the same guy did these, or Life Force or Poltergeist. I mean, Texas Chainsaw, all these things that are just so great. But at a lot of time he gets shit on for some of the crappier films. But even in the crappier films, you can see greatness. And I think that's the thing that, as a filmmaker, it's fun for me that even a bad movie can be informative and learn from and have those things and still find elements that are redeeming, whether it's a performance or a special effect or even the music. I mean, there's things that you can like, okay, that's, to me, that worked.
Yeah.
It may have its flaws, but I can watch it. Oh, I can watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 over and over and over again because of the humor and because of the choices and because of the things, because it's not, the sequel you were expecting. It's something that it's like, this guy's like, you know what, here's what I'm going to make. I'm not going to make something you're expecting. It's completely different.
Yeah, and so many people go into making a movie that it may not have the biggest star or the best director, but then someone else somewhere along the line makes a great choice, and you're just like, oh my God, this is a great shot, or that's like, this is a great set, and you can kind of just, make mental notes of like, okay, that's great. That someone that could be used in a different way in a different film, and
Sure, sure.
it's just always kind of like you never know what you're going to learn from where, and that's to me such an important thing.
No, especially if you're open to that kind of thing, where I think a lot of people are closed. You read some reviews, worst movie ever, and it's closed minded to, it's like, they were hating it before they even started watching it.
Yeah, for
There's
sure.
something just, a negative ask of going into a film that is kind of baffles me, because it's like I go into everything, whether I hate the director or his previous work, I'm going to just watch it as a piece of art, and then from that I'll decide whether I like it or not. But I'm not going to resort to going online and telling people to stay away from it. It's like everyone's got their own thing. If they dig it, they hate it. But it's fine to say, hey, I didn't like this, not my cup of tea or whatever, but to stay away from this is baffling to me.
It's funny that you say that specifically because I'm going through that in real time. I live in Plymouth, Mass,
Sure.
and Thanksgiving just came out, the new Eli Roth movie, and there's like they wanted to film it here, and the town was like, we don't want a
Wow.
horror movie associated with our Thanksgiving Day parade, and so then when it finally came out, there's this whole group of people that'd be like, oh, it's fake Plymouth, and I'm like, do you know how many movies are actually filmed where there's like
Right,
almost none of
right.
them, and it's just like, why are you so angry that it wasn't filmed in, like, I was bummed because I'm like, I think it would be cool that it was filmed here,
Yeah, totally.
but just people being like, I'm not going to see it's fake Plymouth, being like, yeah, Groundhog Day didn't take place in actual Punxsutawney,
Right, right.
it's just this weird reason to shit on the movie, and I'm like, I don't, go see it and then shit on it if it's bad.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. But so you're also a writer. Do you prefer to direct things that you've written, or does it make a difference? Do
I'm open to that, but even if someone else brings me a script, I usually like to kind of go through it just to kind of visualize whether it's just changing some camera direction or adding camera direct, whatever it is, to give me a familiarity to it that's kind of embedded, just even if I'm not trying
Mhm.
to, what it's just kind of, it makes it more easier for me to get there and like, okay, I know what we need. We need this, we need this, we need this. And it also helps going through it like that, because I don't usually have a script supervisor, so I have to kind of remember what I need and what I got, just because when your budgets are so low, those are key jobs you can kind of cut out of the way and save some money that you can put somewhere else. So being as familiar with the script as I can, whether it's taking a pass on someone else's script, so I'm just more familiar with it and know exactly what I need to make it work.
Yeah, and so if you're writing something for yourself, do you feel like less need to be descriptive because you're like, no, I know what I'm thinking, kind of thing. Where if you were gonna, like, for someone else, you might be like, be a little more specific and spell it out a little more, like you
Well,
found that?
I try to keep it pretty, discreet. I try to keep it entertaining, because I hate scripts that you read and it's just kind of a bore. So I've had one, a great compliment I've had from a lot of my scripts is that they're very entertaining and it doesn't feel like a script. There's a nice flow to it because no matter when you read a lot of scripts and a lot, I go back to reading, a lot of Richard Matheson scripts, for whether it be Duel or some of the Twilight Zones or, just reading his scripts are just like, wow, these are like a little novel. I mean, they're great. So I kind of am inspired by that to try to keep the same kind of thing. So at least, this script may not work or it may not be whatever, but it was a good read or
Yeah.
it flew by or whatever it was. So at least I succeeded in that if, nothing else.
Um, can you tell us what the movie is you're filming in December? Can you like tell us a little bit about it, or is it kind of like
It's based
and
on Lovecraft's Beyond the Wall of Sleep mixed
oh, I'm
with
sorry, we did say it was Lovecraftian. That's right.
but mixed with characters from my first film, Unspeakable, which is kind of it's a funny thing because the actor from my first film, his name is Roger Garcia. I reconnected with him after like 20 years and said, "Hey, do you want to play a bit part in Pig Killer? Play a blind man at the door." "Sure, I'd love to. Hey, it's been 20 years. This is great." He comes down, shoots a scene. We had a good time, and he's like, "Hey, you should do a sequel to Unspeakable." And I'm like, that movie didn't really make any money, and why? "No, there's a huge fan base for it." I'm like, I don't think so, but hey, look, Roger, you find the money, I'll make it.
Yeah.
And a month later, he calls up, "Hey, I got $100,000. I got an investor. He's ready to do it. Write the script. Here's my idea for it." And he lays into this idea, and I'm like, well, find a prison location because this is, and he kept falling apart finding this location, and I'm like, well, if you've got the money, I've got the check right here. It's ready to go. Like, okay, let me draw up a contract because, I want to make sure that everyone knows what we're doing and has it in the thing. So I wrote up a contract, sent it to him. He signed the contract. He owes me $150,000 to basically do this movie. I'm like, okay, it's funded. I start writing the script and I'm like, you know what? There was a Lovecraft story that dealt with dreams and these elements, which the first film, Unspeakable, had these dream elements going for it. So I'm like, let me see if I can interject the two. And, I reread the Lovecraft story. I'm like, this is perfect. It just kind of came together. 2 weeks later, the script was done. I'm like, this is one of the best things I've ever written. I'm like, this is going to be great. And the back of my mind, I'm like, don't send him that until you get the check. Don't until you get the check. But it got the better of me, and I sent him the script, and he basically pulled the plug on the whole project, pulled his money
Oh
out. I had
no.
to threaten to sue him, and they paid me a little bit, and we're like, we left it amicable. We'll make something else. But he was so turned off by elements of this script and offended by it that it kind of derailed that. So I had to take that and then try to find funding for it. And at that point, I was kind of just angry. I'm like, no matter what, if I have to put my money in myself, I'll do it. But Susan Prever came on board, and then some names came on board, and then some money came on board, and then pretty soon we were fine, and it was just a little bump in the road. But it's funny how those things of what you might think is great, someone else is going to be either scared by or whatever, and that was kind of the way it went.
That's so fun. Yeah, because I was just gonna be like, oh, I love when those little collaborative moments happen because something fairly similar recently happened to me where like someone just made like a vague reference to something I'd written, and I'm like, you've completely changed the way that I'm looking at it because my brain just jumped to like parts that hasn't even been written yet. I'm like, oh, that's gonna work perfectly.
Right.
But to hear that it can go so south and like you could lose the funding over something like that is
No, because it's one of those things when I had forgotten one key element. He had brought me out to lunch, and he was pitching the way he wanted to do it, and that's fine, and it could have worked. But for me, the Lovecraft angle sells.
Mhm.
And if you add those things with it, it's just it's a safety net. And I was trying to convince him. I'm like, look, your investor, this is a safety net, and it's just the way to do it. But he said, you know what, my sister doesn't want any of that dick stuff. You've got that dick stuff in some of your movies where you're cutting off dicks or you're doing this stuff with dicks. No dicks. And I'm just kind of nodding during lunch, and I'm like, yeah. And then when I start writing the script, I think subconsciously I'm like, more dicks, more dicks, off dicks, alien dicks. So I add all this stuff. So when he reads it, he's like, instead of no dicks, you've got all dicks. What is this? And I'm like, oh shit, I forgot you mentioned that. So
Yeah.
there was a thing, and I'm like, you only hear kind of what you want to hear, whether it's good things or bad things. And at that point, for me, when someone pitches ideas and all that stuff, if they don't have the money, it's just all bullshit. And I've heard so many stories from producers and investors and actors who want to be stars saying, oh, I've got money, I've got this, but it's just, lip service until you actually see it. And
Oh
breaking
yeah.
my rule of wait until the check clears before you show any of these fuckwads the script,
Yeah.
because I'm open to collaboration and I'm open to changing it. And I even said to him, look, man, I'll take all the dicks out. We'll change the whole thing to whatever way you want. But I need that money to make sure that it's going to get made, because I'm not cool with, I've got a pile of screenplays in my closet that I've written over the years on spec. And as much as I love writing and love doing it, it's very deflating when you've done all this work and then it's like, no, we don't have the money, or we don't like the script, or whatever it might be. And it's like, well, okay,
Yeah.
because it's such a small amount of money to be making movies for.
Right.
$100,000 is, was a big was a low budget for Night of the Living Dead. I mean, that's, 50 years ago. So, it's kind of making, Night of the Living Dead budget movies now 50 years ago. And people are wondering like, oh, this seems low budget or this seems cheap. It's like, well, it is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, everyone's getting paid. Everyone, is going to have something that's going to play the festivals and get distributed. So, I mean, I'm not going to run away with the money and buy a boat or anything. So, at least investors know that it's like, well, I know what I'm going to get. I'm going to get something that's got a beginning, a middle, and the end. We'll probably play all these festivals, get, 90% good reviews, and be released. And I mean, that's all you can hope for.
Yeah. And then you just, I think everyone wants that kind of cult classic movie. And, even the biggest cult classic movie is not the only movie they made. You got to make them until one hits. And it's like trying to make a viral TikTok or something. You don't know which one's going to go viral. You just got to kind of keep making them until it happens.
No, and if you have fun doing it, I mean, that's the whole point. If everyone's, having a good time and you finish the day and they have a smile on their face the next day, you're doing something right.
Yeah. And I was telling someone the other day, they're like, oh, you have a fun job. And I'm like, yeah, but it's, still a job. And I'm like, I feel like 70% of my time is doing things that I don't really want to do 30% of the things I really like to do. And to me, that just sounds like what you're going through is like trying to find the funding and trying to get everybody on board so you can do the fun thing like that little portion of the time.
Right. No, that's totally it. I mean, because that's the thing. If you're, when you talk about bigger budgets and all that kind of stuff, then there's more people that, have an input and more things that you have to kind of abide by. I mean, the nice thing of doing them at these budgets, you have complete control, and the people, know that from the get-go. They're like, so it's like, I'm happy to hear your ideas or suggestions, but at the same time, I'm not going to throw out, these things that are the reason I'm doing it for free, basically.
Right.
And having fun doing it, but it's because then you're like, who am I making this movie for? This person who's putting in 50 grand, or for myself who's working for nothing. So it's a fine line of saying, okay, I'm fine doing that and giving that, but I'm going to stick to this because that's the reason I'm making it.
And I'll have as many dicks in my movie as I want.
That's right. Alien dicks everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll definitely be in the show notes, I'm sure. My producer would be like, and they talk about dicks a lot. But where can people
Just
go
put in those beeps?
Yeah, there you go. Where can you go? Where can listeners go to find out like when your movie you're filming in December is coming out, where they can get your other stuff, and
Yeah, I mean, I post everything on, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. You just type in my name and you'll find me. And I just it's all about just what's going on with these films or the next film. And, you can keep up to date with me there.
Do you find social media important and or helpful to getting the word out about the movies? Because I feel like
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I'm not really a social media kind of guy. I mean, I don't even own a cell phone. I never have. I mean, I'm kind of just, a Luddite in a lot of ways.
Holy crap.
I mean, so, I watch my Betamax and my reel-to-reel recordings and, but, I think that it's an important thing if someone out there sees the trailer and they're like, hey, I really like this trailer. And then they find your Facebook and they see it's playing here at this festival or that, or it's got this good review or this bad review. I mean, at least they know that it exists, or, and there's not someone just saying, waiting for, the sun to shine. I've got to do what I can with the limited means. And especially when you've got, okay, I've got no money. What's a way to promote a film? You play a festival, it gets a good review. You spew that on Facebook, or you retweet their stuff, or you then start getting a thing, or doing these interviews, and 100 people watch it and 5 of them are like, hey, I want to go see that movie, or whatever. You've reached someone. It worked. And it may not be this grand scale of what someone is hoping for, of Hollywood banging down my door to direct a remake of Todd Browning's Freaks or something, but for me, it's fun doing it, and I got no problem whoring myself out on social media and trying to get someone interested, because if you find one person, it's successful.
I'm still confused by that you don't have a cell phone. How do you make phone calls?
I try not to.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, like, I very rarely make a phone call on my phone. Like, calling it a phone is almost stupid, because that's the least thing I use it. Yeah. But I want to say thanks, man. That's a lot of fun, and looking forward to this next movie.
Hey, thanks for having me, and let's do it again.
Yeah, when it comes out, come on back, and we'll talk more.
Let's do it.
All right, man. Thanks.
Man.
And listeners, you can check us back next week, every Monday. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art, or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also, don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.